Go, and we're going live. Woohoo! Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to our webinar. Just give everyone a chance to get settled. We'll make introductions in just a moment. Before we do, just make yourself at home. We've got plenty of seats up the front. Don't be shy down the back there. Lots of seats up the front there. As is mandatory on these webinars, we need to talk about the weather before we get started. So if you could just let me know in the chat functionality where you're tuning in from and what the weather is like, where you are, that will help us just make sure the chat is working. And also it's pretty cloudy where I am here in Dublin. So I just want to make sure that the clouds are going to clear hopefully later on after this webinar, I would hope. So yeah, if you can hear us, or if you can hear me okay, maybe let me know, pop something in the chat so we know that's working. And then we'll get started. We'll make our introductions in just a moment or two. So Anya, Sinead, how are you guys doing?
Great. Very well. The nice weather that we've had this week.
Very good. You've been enjoying it?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It's hard to get work done. That's the only thing I will say. As nice as the weather is, it's hard to get work done in that weather.
No, definitely.
Quite distracting, all right.
Okay, and just let the tangent team know in the background. Noreen is just letting me know the chat is disabled on her end, so maybe you could just have a look at that. I know people are absolutely dying to tell me what the weather is like, so I knew that would be the case. So maybe we can fix that as we move through the session. So welcome everybody. You're very welcome to our session today. Brian is my name. I lead a community called Workplace Wellbeing Ireland. And I also lead the postgrad in workplace wellness at Tangent, Trinity's Ideas Workspace. So I'm delighted to be joined by two of our very recent graduates on the postgrad today, Sinead and Anya. Sinead, Anya, I'll hand over to you guys. Maybe could you introduce yourselves, first of all, before we kick off?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Anya O'Dowd. I am the Senior Workplace Experience Manager here at FreeNow Ireland. And pass it over to you, Sinead.
My name is Sinead Egan, and I'm an organizational culture consultant. So I work with a company called Inspiring Change, and we help organizations diagnose and change their cultures. And we help with internal comms and employee engagement as well.
Fantastic. So brilliant to have you both on board, and great to have you're coming at it from different angles then as well, aren't you? Anya, internal in a company, if you like, working internally on the wellbeing program. Sinead, external, if you like, smaller consultancy business looking to work with organizations, so we can maybe get slightly different angles from you guys as we look at our session today. And the theme for our session, of course, is embedding a culture of health in the workplace. So for the next 30-40 minutes or so, we'll have a bit of a chat about that. We'll welcome questions. I see the Q&A function is certainly working, so that's great. Hopefully the chat will be enabled soon as well. So everybody tuning in, you're welcome to pop your messages in there. If you have them, we'll definitely allow time for Q&A. So why don't we kick off with, I guess, the basic enough question, like what does a culture of health, like what does that mean to you guys? Anya, do you want to kick off?
I suppose a culture of health, I suppose it's creating an environment that nurtures overall health, happiness and satisfaction of employees in the workplace. So I suppose it encompasses a range of different factors that contribute to workers' physical, mental, social and even financial well-being, I would say.
Very good, very good. Sinead?
Yeah, so I would echo all of what Anya said. I think it's about organizations protecting and promoting well-being and making that a real organizational priority. So by that, I mean, it should have the same importance as other strategic objectives. It shouldn't be seen as a nice to have or a tick box exercise. And I think that has to happen at two levels. So at the organizational level, having the policies, procedures, practices that support healthy behaviors. And then also for the individual, making sure that they're empowered and supported to look after their own well-being needs.
Very good, very good. So an organizational level focus, but also then the individual focus is in there as well. Excellent. Okay, so that helps. And maybe on the chat or in the Q&A, and let me know what's your own interpretation of a culture of health. I'd love to hear your own thoughts on that. It's something we speak about quite a bit on the postgrad, about a culture of health, because I guess a lot of companies out there, a lot of people, a lot of well-intentioned organizations, as I see it, they're trying to do something from a workplace well-being perspective, but ultimately what it boils down to is they're just engaged in this endless cycle of random acts of wellness. You know, nice stuff, but ultimately not really leading anywhere. And kind of, Sinead, you were kind of touching on almost the strategic aspect of what a culture of health is. How do we move these organizations, or how do we go from these random acts to that more of a strategic approach to that culture of health? How do we support companies with that?
So you're right. I think a lot of people are very well intentioned and they create these random acts, but the issue with that is that they're often addressing the symptoms, not the root cause of some of the problems or risks in the organization. So for example, if somebody goes out of their way to start a yoga class to help with stress, that's great. But if they're not addressing the cause of the stress, like maybe work intensity or workload, it's not going to make a meaningful difference. The other thing with those random acts is they're usually individual driven. And that means the individual is doing something that resonates with them. So maybe they're doing something that's helped with their own well-being. So if John in finance wants to organize a cycling club, that's brilliant. But that's only going to help people like John. It's not going to address the diversity of needs in the organization. So when we think about making that a cultural thing, organizations have to be very intentional about priorities, having a sustained commitment to those priorities, and then planning actions aligned with those priorities. So it needs to be more strategic, as you said, Brian, and it has to be a program that's addressing real needs that matter in the organization. And culture is formed collectively. So it can't be changed by one person. It's made up of norms and practices that we adopt into organizations as the right way to do things. So individual employees make assumptions about what they need to do to survive and to succeed in an organization based on that. So if you have a culture of health, it means it's being collectively accepted as the right way to do things. And the behaviors are healthy, and everybody thinks that's the accepted way of doing things, and it will help them to succeed in the organization. So I think that's the critical difference between having it as part of the culture or having these random acts driven by individuals.
Excellent. Yeah, that does help kind of summarize it, doesn't it? Like we're all probably, John, in finance at some stage, very well intentioned, and that there's a place for that as well, for the cycling club and for the yoga and stuff like that. But it's the culture, the norms of the organization. Are they supportive of the healthier choices, just the broader, healthier choices that are out there? I mean, nudging people towards those healthier choices. What's your own thoughts, Anya?
Yeah, I suppose I would have even fallen into this trap myself when I first started in Free Now in this role. I don't think people in these companies are really aware of what they're doing. I think they mean well, but yeah, it's just really not going to be something that's going to work long term. Or they also just need to start listening to their own employees. I think a lot of people will just go, there might be one person who's running this thing and be like, okay, this is what I think that we need. Maybe we need to start this. We need to start doing yoga. We need to, bring in Bresdy to talk about mental health or whatever it is. But there needs to be more of a survey done for employees to see what they actually want, because oftentimes the initiatives that are run here are things that the specific person in the wellbeing role is actually thinking about, instead of asking the employees what they want and also what they might need instead. So yeah, unfortunately, it can also be like as Sinead said, a box ticking exercise. But yeah, on the contrary, then embedding a culture of health is a much larger task, requires lots of research and planning. Also, the buy-in from the leadership is a major part of it, and also getting the buy-in from the employees as well. So yeah, as part of that, having the strategic action plan too, that's a major one that needs to be looked at.
Yeah, very good. And you mentioned the box ticking there. we hear that quite often, don't we? That this organization or that organization is just box ticking when it comes to workplace well-being. I don't think that is the challenge. That those companies that we're saying are, let's say, they're box ticking, they don't know that they're box ticking. That's the challenge. So how do we, as the future workplace well-being leaders, how do we educate them? And that's part of our role, I think, isn't it? If we're internal in an organization, if we're external, and it is challenging, because the leader is going to tell you, the leaders in that organization are going to tell you, we have an EAP, we have our mental health first aiders, brilliant program. They've done their 2 days. So there's no mental health issues at our organization. We're done. How do we have that conversation with those leaders? And obviously, we're not going to tell them that they're box ticking, but how do we have that conversation with them to try and bring them to the next level? So look, there's an awful lot more you could be doing here. Any thoughts on that?
I think that group is really critical because senior leaders, they have a disproportionate effect on the culture in the organization. When employees make assumptions about what's needed to survive and succeed, they're looking at those senior leaders. They're seeing what they've done. So I think it is a group that we need to pay a lot of attention to. They really have to be brought on board, and we need real buy-in and advocacy from that group. So I think you can start by making a business case, because that's how this level of the organization often works. It's what will resonate with them. And one of the frameworks that we looked at during the course, which was really helpful, was looking at what's legal, what's smart, and what's right. So start off with telling them what has to be done for the organization to be compliant, and making sure that they understand there's a duty of care as an employer, and that's some things we should do because it's the right thing to do for the colleagues working with us. And then maybe one of the most impactful bits is illustrating to them the smart business case. So if we invest in well-being, we can actually see the results in terms of workforce productivity. We can see the results in terms of reducing absenteeism. And we can also have people who are happier to be here. It can help us build that stronger employer value proposition and keep people and attract new talent in as well. And that business case needs to tie into their vision and the strategic objectives so that they can see the alignment between investing in well-being and then investing in the organization. But I think if there is that awareness or knowledge gap, they need to be given support as well. So they have to understand all the facets of well-being. And if we want them to be good role models, they might need support, coaching, or time invested in themselves first, so that they can actually model those healthy behaviors in the organization.
Brilliant. Yeah, I love so that comes to WHO, doesn't it? That your angle there, the legal thing to do, it's the right thing to do, and a smart thing to do, the business case. And depending on, maybe it's the organization you're dealing with or the particular leader, maybe there's one of those angles that jumps out more than the other. Maybe the legal implications are important to this organization or this person. Maybe it is, they think ethically, they're an ethical leader. So, looking after their colleagues just as a real driver for them. Or in many cases, it will be the business case, won't it? It's just a smart thing to do. It just makes business sense. So there are a couple of different angles, or might be a combination of that you're working with these leaders on.
Yeah.
Anya?
I would say also just to remember that no one business is the same. I think when it comes to well-being, I think it's very much dependent on the company, the culture, even of the leaders themselves. If you're going with the business case to them, they might be interested in certain aspects, as you say, Brian, to go at the for the legal side of things, or it's something that's more so like interested in them. Say, for example, even just delving into things a little bit deeper, going like, if we want to have like well-being champions in the organization, like having KPIs for those champions, if the business is very much like a data-driven company, and they need to see that these people are working towards goals and things like that, to bring it down to that detail, and having the KPIs that these people are working against for the initiatives that they're working on within the Wellbeing Champions team.
That's a great point. And I've worked with a couple of companies recently that are very KPI driven. It's all about measurements. So they're, almost their first question was, well, how do we measure this? What kind of metrics do we put in place? So that was really important for them that they had that. So yeah, brilliant. Thanks for sharing that. I just want to read out a couple of the comments that are coming in from the audience. And thanks everybody for submitting. Well, what does a culture of health mean to you? So Andrea is saying, it's creating a culture where employees feel empowered to action and implement change for their own well-being. And she's also saying it's feeling able to co-create with management, bottom up and top down. I think you were talking about that collective approach, Sinead, and Anya, you mentioned the well-being champions, and it's almost where the leadership team meets your well-being champions, your network, that bottom down and top down and bottom up approach. Matthias is saying it's to promote serving leadership where employee experience at work is positive, their health, wellness, sustainability and integrity is maintained, and where they're granted autonomy to get tasks done within the deadline using productivity techniques that suits them rather than everyone doing the tasks exactly the same way. Interesting here, the use of the word autonomy. That's definitely a driver, according to Daniel Pink. Anyway, it's a driver for motivation for people, for motivating people at work. I'll just get a question from the audience, a few questions coming in, which is great. So I might ask you a question, it'll come up from Mariam. Thanks, Mariam, for the question. How can organizations work towards having consistent programs for well-being?
I would say they're starting with a plan. You really need a plan. There's no way that you're going to have a successful program without having that plan. For example, it could be like an operating plan for the organization that lays out exactly what you're going to do before you even do it. It also can actually then stand as a point of reference for somebody who's taken over from the role. For example, say if there's a wellbeing lead, they might create the operating plan. They might be at a certain stage and actually then be leaving the company. Then there's a plan in place there for the next person stepping in to take over for that person, and they're going to just be able to pick up where the last person left off, I guess. So yeah, I think that the plan is a very, very important part of this.
Very good. The continuity, isn't it? Because people do leave roles all the time. So it's important that the role doesn't walk out the door, that the person walks out the door, but the role stays. Yeah, really important.
I would add to that as well. When you have that plan in place, that should be guiding everyone. But I think the middle management layer is one where you need to pay a lot of attention and make sure that they can execute it, because that's where your inconsistencies come through. So we know that change can be planned really well. You can have the best strategy in place, but you're actually relying on your line managers or your people leaders at that team level to execute that in their team. And there has to be a little bit of discretion there, because in different functions with people doing different roles, that will create different wellbeing needs and risks. So it's great to be able to give a little bit of autonomy to line managers to be able to help their team and support them in a meaningful way. That helps to build trust, which we know boosts well-being, but it's also giving them enough support, giving them that clear framework, making sure they know what the plan is and how they should execute that in their team. So I think spending time investing in those line managers, making sure that they understand what well-being is and how to support that for themselves and for the members of their team is really critical.
Excellent point. Professor Sir Gary Cooper talks about this quite often, doesn't he? The importance of middle management support for this. It can often be the place where it breaks down. We might have that leadership team bought in behind this, and we might have our network of champions, different levels of seniority throughout the organization. But if the people managers, the line managers, are not bought into this, that's where it can all break down. If you don't have your line manager support for whatever it is that you're doing, that's where it can break down. So as you're saying there, Sinead, training, supports, whatever that looks like in your organization. There's also some interesting conversations happening in companies around it. Is there some kind of a KPI or an objective that these line managers could have, aligning with, if you do have in your operating plan, if you've aligned what you're doing from a well-being perspective with the organization's objectives, that should kind of trickle down to your objective setting, for everybody, and certainly for the line managers as well. So can that be incorporated in some way? And we don't force them to have to do it, but it's something they're working towards. It's the business objectives, if you like, the well-being objectives. But that could be a way that might work if that's what works in your organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I think if you're going to put an objective for those line managers, it has to be backed up with them having the support to develop that capacity. So as long as they're getting the two sides of the coin, I think that would be a good way of maintaining vigilance on that and making sure people are bought in.
Yeah, very good. Yeah. Here's a really interesting question from Matthias. And by the way, guys, keep questions coming, comments coming. You might have to use the Q&A functionality. I'm not 100% sure if the chat is back up and running yet. So a question from Matthias. So we spoke about maybe the business case angle. We spoke about that. So Matthias is asking, he feels like there's been a change of focus from the traditional bottom line, so the profit only, to the triple bottom line, as he's calling it. So profit, planet, people, and some also add in a fourth P, purpose. So in your experience, what initiatives have you seen companies create for this change, or have you seen any? Profit, planet, people, and purpose.
I actually just had an example of this. I was at a summit yesterday, ESG, so environment, social and governance. Yeah. And there was actually a speaker talking from version 1, the tech company.
Oh yeah.
And they actually have brought in within their pillars, they have brought in kind of this within their well-being, like their well-being initiatives are kind of aligned as well with their social responsibilities or CSR, and even, for example, like communities, like bringing the volunteering aspect and things like that into their well-being initiatives, because we all know the importance of the giving back and the I suppose feelings that everyone gets with that as well, the reward that people get. So that's an example there on that one. Brilliant.
Yeah, and the communities within our organizations, well, internal certainly, and also external. I mean, that's one of the 4 areas, isn't it, the WHO talk about in terms of their avenues of influence. So our internal, some companies will call them ERGs, employee resource groups, and they can be powerful. They can be powerful within organizations. Any thoughts yourself, Sinead?
Well, I don't know if people are sick of hearing this example at the moment, but I do like HubSpot and what they're doing. I think they really answer at least 3 of those P's, so the profit, people, purpose, really well. And I think they're just interesting because they invest in their culture as much as they invest in their product. And I think a lot of companies don't do that. The culture is secondary to the product or the service that they're trying to deliver. And in terms of their focus on people, well-being is a huge part of that. And they've introduced a lot of practices that go beyond the typical EAP and supports. So they have really intentional practices around helping people to disconnect, having unlimited time off, having a week where the company closes for everyone, having Fridays without meetings. They also have a really nice piece where they have leaders leaving loudly. So they encourage leaders at all levels to tell their team when they're leaving early, to tell their team when they're going on leave, and making that really something that is the norm. So making it critical that people actually take that time off, because they know that that then is paid back in terms of productivity and people being able to do their jobs well.
I haven't heard that one before. Leavers leading loudly. That is absolutely fantastic. That it reminds me of my old manager at years ago. He used to kind of stop by on a Friday evening. He would stop by everyone's desk or most people's desk and kind of just, and we'd be so busy. Like, it was professional services, we were up against deadlines. It was like 5 p.m. on a Friday. He said, look, I know you're busy. Well, I'm heading off for the weekend. Look, whatever it is, we'll wait till Monday morning. You've done a great job, kind of thing. it was kind of almost like your permission to leave. It was total opposite of what we've maybe heard about before, and probably experienced, where people don't dare leave until the most senior person in the room, most senior manager, leaves the office. So I absolutely love that idea. Leavers leading loudly. I am definitely going to use that again. I've heard some of the other stuff at HubSpot, but that's a new one for me. So thanks for sharing that one.
That actually brought up another thing that I heard about, which was from Slack. So their motto is do your work and go home. And they actually like they penalize people for using Slack out of hours and
No way.
weekends. So yeah, they're going one step further there, even with the penalizing. I don't know what the penalty is now, to be honest. Yeah,
50 burpees or something like that.
some torturous like that.
It sounds like, so do your work and then go home. It sounds a bit like, I haven't been in Eddie Rockets in a long time, but they used to have on the menus, eat, then get out. Kind of reminded me of that approach. So, do your work, when you're here, do really good work, but then you're more valuable to us when you're rested and you come back in then refreshed and ready to tackle whatever it is you're tackling. So that's absolutely the approach. So I love that. I love that idea. We've kind of touched on it. The culture of health. Is there what kind of practical steps are we talking about here? Is there someone's getting started, right? They're small, medium, large, whatever the case may be. They're the well-being leader or the person who wants to take responsibility for well-being in their workplace. What's maybe the first 2 or 3 steps they should be looking at it? Is it getting the leaders on board, or is it something even before that?
I would say that getting the leaders on board should probably be up there with the top thing to do first. I think it's super important. It's unfortunate that there are these kind of grassroots efforts being taken, but it's been proven that they're not really as effective as the top-down approach. So yeah, for sure, I think that definitely needs to come in first. Also as well, having that, as I think Sinead touched on before, about the shared ownership for well-being. So to have different teams within the organization having a say and having an impact in the program is super important. Just I think it can sometimes be left up to the HR team, but I think now it's kind of going in a different direction. I think people are copping on to the fact that they need everybody within the organization to have a say and to have their impact in the wellbeing program. But yeah, I think the main thing I think that I learned from the course as well is that the data needs to speak for itself. You need to be doing surveys, you need to be doing focus groups. You can't just go off opinions or something that someone else might think is a good idea or thinks is the right idea. It needs to come from what is actually happening within the organization. You might think as a leader that all of your employees are, have a safe working environment, but they might actually feel that it's not a safe space to speak up, for example, or something like that. And doing those surveys is definitely a way of finding that out. So yeah, that'll be the starting point.
Yeah, and as it turns out, they're the first three steps in the framework that we go through in the program. So yeah, that's good. You were definitely doing your homework then, anyway.
Brained in me now, Brian.
And anything to add to that, Sinead?
No, I mean, I completely agree with everything Anya said there. And I think for organizations, it's important as well to not try and do everything at once. And what you'll find when you do that employee listening is there'll be things that are working, that are really strengths, that are helping people maintain well-being, and they should be given attention to. So keeping and preserving those things, and then picking a few priorities that you're going to change. I would say don't fragment your effort too much. And when you get to that stage of designing the plan and then picking the initiatives that are going to support people, make sure that you put good change management in place, because this is a change exercise a lot of the time. And we know that most changes fail because we don't give enough investment into that change management piece. So manage it like another organizational change.
Brilliant. Yeah, great advice. And Glenn, just on the comments, is saying that he worked for Slack for 5 years, and he's agreeing with your comment there. Anya is saying that working hard and going home. That was the big work-life emphasis, which is definitely led by example. We've had Slack, we've had HubSpot, and any other examples of maybe current employer, former employer, somewhere you've worked, somewhere you know about that's doing something interesting in this space?
I think Vodafone, who I haven't worked for, but I think what they're doing in the space around menopause is quite ahead of the curve, and making that menopause not a taboo subject anymore in the organization, providing toolkits to help employees understand that and understand how to support colleagues that are going through that. I think that's really commendable. And we see more of that where organizations are looking at wider policies that can support those different aspects of well-being. And some of that's going to be driven by new legislation coming in. But I think also those companies that are going above and beyond and are ahead of the curve, they're doing some really great things.
Well, if you're mentioning Vodafone, I mean, it was only last week, wasn't it? They had the carers package as well. So for anyone, an employee caring for someone, it's just an additional 10 days leave, if I'm not mistaken, included as part of your package. It could be young child, older adults, it doesn't really matter, but there's a carers package included, and other supports as well. We've had, is Vodafone potentially, certainly Bank of Ireland with their domestic abuse policy as well. A few organizations, including the menopause piece that you mentioned. So yeah, legislation coming, as you said, but a lot of these organizations kind of getting out ahead of it and even going maybe even beyond it then as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I have different sort of an example, I suppose, going back to the ERGs. Indeed, I think are literally doing a great job on this front. So we had actually a discussion. I'm not sure what is his name, Brian. I can't remember his name. Dylan from Indeed came in to speak to us on the course, and he explained the ins and outs of the way that they structure their ERG program. So they have actually a permanent role for the leads of the ERGs, and oftentimes in companies at the moment these things are all done like on a voluntary level, but in this case there is the lead that is full-time employment, and then they have a proper structure in place for the whole ERGs. They have leaders for each community within their group. They even go as far as giving the time out of their day to focus on work. I think it's something like 10% of the time is allocated, and they're allowed and approved by their manager to work on their ERG initiatives. And then at the end of the year, they go even further when the remuneration comes into things or into the space or whatever. So basically that if they have some money left over for people at the end of the year, that this money goes back into the people who've been working on the ERGs, and they actually most of the time do end up spending even more time doing it because it's more of a passion project in a way. But yeah, I think Indeed is leading the way in the ERG space at the moment.
It's a pretty impressive structure, all right, that he showed us, wasn't it? Yeah, and they're only a few years into their journey as well, which was fantastic. I think it was only 2019 they started, and now they were 4 years later, and they have, was it 19? And they call them IRGs at Indeed, inclusion resource groups. It all goes back to, so inclusion is one of Indeed's 5 values that I think they renewed them in 2019. Inclusion was one of the values. That led to, there's a senior vice president for inclusion at Indeed. And in fact, it all filtered down all the way through to the EMEA region. As you mentioned, a full-time community manager responsible for working with the leads across these now 19 IRGs, inclusion resource groups at Indeed. And they all have a structure, and it was pretty impressive. But a quick turnaround as well, 0 to 19 IRGs in a short period of time. So other organizations can do it as well, with that little bit of the alignment with the vision, and then the leadership support and that filtering down.
For sure.
Yeah, no, it was a really impressive example, certainly. A few questions coming in. Antoinette is touching on, we've answered a lot of it, but she's coming at the angle from, let's say, a medium-sized organization, looking to embed that program, that culture of health, maybe doesn't have the resources of a much larger organization. Any thoughts, any suggestions there for Antoinette?
I would say if you're talking about resources being money, to get creative, there is so many options that don't involve a huge budget. So, you can look at, for example, EAP providers or health insurance providers often have some initiatives included in the cost of their plans. You can also look within your organization, for example, like maybe like there's a finance department in your team. Maybe there's one person on the finance team that could hold workshops for personal finance for the whole rest of the team. Yeah, let me see what else.
Look internally initially.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you never know what resources you might actually have there. And also sometimes the budgets can be caught up in other things. So like you might have a training budget there that isn't being fully utilized every year. There might be some wellbeing trainings that could be used with the remainder of the budget, or even an events budget could be, could turn into a wellbeing events budget. So yeah, and also even just, for example, in Free Now here, we're doing an initiative called Tag Time, where you would tag somebody to take 2 hours out of their day to do something that is, that promotes their own well-being. So it might be like going for a walk, might be, going for a walk with their dog, going for a hike, leaving early on a Friday to go off and do, go to the beach or whatever it is. And then the next person nominates somebody else to take 2 hours out of their day to do something for them. So it works really well. And it's a nice way. What we do is we kind of take a photo of what happens on the tag time, and then we share it back with the team, and everyone gets to kind of know a little bit more about each member on the team because of their little tag time or what they like to do for their well-being. So that's kind of a free option in a way. I know there's time, but it's a cheaper option, I suppose.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a pay it forward style
exactly.
thing. So is the idea eventually it'll go around the whole organization? Is that
that's the thing. We do it like on a team by team basis. So like the Irish team, like there's 40 of us, say, and then now the other teams have started catching on to it because I've been telling them to do it.
That's a great example. I mean, you mentioned resources, is that budget, and there's so much you can do without budget. I think you probably need time. I always say is more important than budget. And I'm guessing a lot of your people listening in are probably time poor at the moment. And so that example, Anya, you're giving people time back. Sinead, some of the examples you had from HubSpot where they didn't take up, they actually gave people time back. I mean, even from your right to disconnect policy to no meetings on Friday. It's giving people time back. It's not taking any time away from people, and doesn't cost. Now, assuming it's in your remit to approve this kind of thing or a bit of management support, but it's giving people time back.
Yeah. And I think in that small to medium-sized company as well, if you can't have a dedicated wellbeing lead or a dedicated team working on this all the time, think about that shared ownership piece. So actually setting up a really effective champion network, it's easier in a smaller, medium-sized company because you can manage that more tightly. So if you do have a sponsor or somebody that can give a little bit of time to supporting that network, you can actually get people working really effectively in different areas of the organization in that champion or voluntary role, or as Anya mentioned, getting a small amount of their week dedicated to doing that role. And that can work really well in small and medium-sized companies as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Very well said. Questions still coming in. We'll try and get to a few more, and we'll try and wrap up as well, give people time to maybe answer, have an open question session at the end. I can hang on for that if people want to talk about the postgrad. Question from Susan asking you, can't we use measurements from those random acts, and that's in quotes as well, to support a plan? Knowing what people feel they gain from these interventions can help paint a picture of the organizational climate. What do you think of that?
100%. So I think when you're talking about a topic like well-being, to prove a case, you should be using data if you have it, in terms of maybe some of those metrics like absentee levels, sickness levels, but then also the human stories are going to be really impactful. And it's going to really help with that education and awareness piece as well, because well-being means something different to all of us. So by illustrating those stories of our colleagues and how they've improved their well-being through different avenues, and maybe through engaging in different events or initiatives that we've offered them, it really helps people to understand you know, how that can be impactful in the organization. So I would agree that using those stories as a way of measuring the impact is really important.
Yeah, I would also say that, you know, it's not like that you should stop doing all of those things. Like, you know, at least you are doing something. And, you know, it's not just that, oh, stop doing that and now start doing this. We actually, me and Sinead worked on one of the projects together recently for our host organization project. And that was the thing, like, you know, they were doing a few random acts of well-being, but we advised them to continue doing some of the things before the initial, like the proper plan was in place, like, so to keep them going slightly, but maybe tailor them a little bit more before all the data is collected. So yeah, I just wanted to make that point there.
Yeah, no, great point. And I suppose what I'm saying about the random acts is, you know, we're not saying you should go or you can go from 0 to 100 to a perfect plan. You know, that's not going to happen. The random acts, the issue is if you're just stuck in that random acts and just, you know, not learning from them, just going around and end the cycle. But absolutely learn from those initial, hopefully, random acts, gather data from them, tweak them, improve them the next time, add to your data set, update a business case with them. You know, it's that continuous improvement cycle. So they can add value. So do learn from them, do improve upon them. And it is going to be a small gradual improvements over time is really what we're aiming for here. You're not going to go from not having anything to a perfect plan the next day. So yeah, it's learn from them and improve. One more question from the audience I'll take, and then we'll might just with a little bit of chat about the postgrads. So Matthias is asking, and he's thanking you both for your amazing answers, by the way. We're just asking, regarding employers offering mental health programs to employees, are you guys seeing any increase in that area?
I think that there is much more awareness about that now, and actually one of maybe what could be described as a silver lining of COVID was that people were more tuned in, because I think most people's mental health was impacted by being in lockdowns for so long. So it's become something that's much more mainstream than it used to be. I think there's still a lot to do in terms of addressing some of the stigma that's still there, making it something that is possible for people to normalize and engage with the resources that are available. I know one of the resources that's available to organizations is Sea Change, and that's their purpose. They can come in and do training, and they can come in and speak to your colleagues about reducing stigma around mental health. And I know that is a growing space, and they'd be doing a lot more work. HubSpot, that example, I know that's a key pillar, and it was during the pandemic that they said we need to invest more in mental health, and their whole approach is trying to normalize that. So making it part of everyday conversations, making it part of a check-in. How are you getting on with your work, and how are you feeling? Are you feeling okay? Are you managing? Are you coping well? And if you're not, did you know we have these supports, and you should go and engage with them and use these resources that are available to you. So I think it's becoming more mainstream. I think there's still work to do, because not everybody feels comfortable discussing mental health challenges. Not every manager and organization can give the appropriate supports, but I think it is going to be something that we have to do more on in the future.
Yeah.
Brilliant, yeah, and Sea Change, they came in, they're an excellent organization. They came into us on the postgrad as well. It's seechange.ie if anyone wants to have a look at their website.
Yeah, another company, I think concentrating in the area of mental health will be CISC. So they kind of obviously realized that they're mainly a male-dominated industry, construction workers. So they recognised the importance, I suppose, of mental health. And a trigger warning here, but especially with the high rates of suicide within the construction workers. I think it was like one person every day in the UK commits suicide working in construction, which is a horrible figure that they kind of have recognised, and they've put into place some of the practices out of the ISO 45003, the standards for the work or mental health at work. So that piece, and they've kind of developed lots of different initiatives, one including like what they use personal stories. So they, for example, will have a person who might have suffered with mental health, but it's not even just mental health. For example, like with smoking cessation and stuff like that, and they might have a person who was struggling with their mental health, and they kind of do a video that's shared among the CISC team, and especially the fact that they have so many different sites and everything like that. They also have a big wellbeing champion network as well, to make sure that they're going around to each individual site and making sure that people are aware that there's help there provided for them. So yeah, that's just another point on that mental health side of things.
It's a great example. Richie Butler, the wellbeing leader there, doing brilliant work at CISC, and very recently as well, talk about putting your money where your mouth is. They've created as well, in addition to Richie's role, they've created 2 mental health advocate roles full-time for two full-time colleagues employed by CISC, going to be going out to the sites, working with their employees on site. So you're really investing in that area. So yeah, brilliant example. Thanks for bringing that up, Anya. So last minute or so, we'll just have a chat about the postgrad. And if anyone has any questions on the postgrad, I put them in the Q&A section there. I can try and answer them at the very end of the session. Last question for you, Anya and Sinead, maybe how was your own experience on the postgrad in workplace wellness at Tangent, and how is it? How are you using it, or are you using it in your day-to-day work?
Yeah, Sinead, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think it was a really positive experience overall. So I found that the course was a great mix of theory and then practical application of that theory as well. So it's giving you that foundation and a level of knowledge that you need to be credible in the space, but then also getting you to that point where you're thinking about how does this actually work and how would I actually apply this in an organization. So I found that really helpful and useful. I think the area is a growing area. There's a lot more roles coming online. I think the legislation that's coming is going to make employers have to pay a lot more attention to this. So I think it's an area where whether you're in that type of role already or you're looking to move into that space, having this type of qualification and this knowledge is going to be really, really useful going forward. And I think that it's a really interesting time in terms of work anyway. And that's what drove me to go and do the course, because I'm already working in organizational culture. But over the past few years, I've really seen that shift to where that includes well-being, and it's looking at those aspects broader than just performance of people. It's the whole person and their whole ability to do the job and do it well. And I think that's a combination of external drivers like the war for talent and trying to attract and retain people. We've obviously seen a huge shift in terms of hybrid working, in terms of how we work in a lot of roles, not all roles, but in a lot of organizations and roles. And I think we're seeing a push to understand diversity and become more inclusive. And all of those drivers relate to well-being. And it's really, I think, a time where it's very exciting to be involved in this area, and there's great opportunities. Whether you're in-house somewhere or you're thinking of moving into a role like this, there's an opportunity to do really impactful work that will make organizations better, but also improve the employee experience.
Excellent. Yeah, I agree. It's an exciting time to be in this space. I feel privileged to be working in this area. There's so much happening, so much going on. you have kind of to do a bit of work yourself to find those opportunities or even create those opportunities, but there's never been a better time for it. So yeah, exciting times. Anya.
Yeah, I would have to agree with everything Sinead said there. Very positive experience. I think what surprised me most, I think before, like after doing the course, or even just when I started the course, was the amount of learnings not to be had just from Brian and Adele, but the cohort themselves. So like, you know, I was kind of thinking, oh, there'll be just loads of people who are in similar roles to me coming into this, you know, but I was completely wrong. So there was lots of people from all different industries. Like we had a guard in our cohort, we had a teacher, we had people from the HSE, we had self-employed people. So it really is something, you know, it can be for anyone. So if you're kind of thinking that, oh, maybe this isn't for me, or, you know, it actually could be. Like I think I would go for it. I think it is a bit of work, but it's definitely worth it in the end. Just even, yeah, the amount of knowledge that is in the room, even just whenever we're doing our classes, the amount of you know, open conversations, discussions, the like thought-provoking conversation that we had were just phenomenal. And then you have the mixture of, you know, the bringing in the psychology of things as well, which was super interesting as well. And you kind of, you know, looking at it from a different angle. So yeah, I think it was just really, really good, and I would encourage anyone to do it. And luckily for me, I was in a position to be able to, you know, work on some of the projects based on Free Now, and like we could use that and stuff like from us as an example. And then luckily now, like I've been able to, you know, now I'm actually developing some wellbeing policies within Free Now since I've finished the course. So yeah, you like straight away being able to use some of the learnings from it. So yeah, I would highly recommend it.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks so much for that. And like we do try and make the assignments, the assessments as practical as possible. So I do remember seeing there was one or two with Free Now where kind of front and center, you were able to get your organization, whatever it was you were doing, apply your particular challenges to that scenario, and you know, you're working on it academically for the course and you're getting a grade for it, which can also, you're bringing that back into your day job then as well. So it's you're being very efficient with your time in that regard. Yeah,
for sure.
Excellent. Cool. Well, listen, thanks Sinead, Anya, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it. I feel like I'm the privileged one. Anya, you mentioned about the people in the room on the program. Like I almost feel a bit guilty there. Like I'm getting to learn just as much as everybody else on the course, and like the knowledge in the room really was incredible. And those discussions, like today, you just multiply that by, you know, whatever we had almost 80 students across 2 cohorts last time. So it was just those conversations every single day. It was absolutely fantastic, and privileged to be involved with it. There's questions coming in on the course. We will be opening up the doors very soon for applications. There is, I think, at least Andrea is certainly saying she's very interested, which is great to hear, Andrea. There's an open evening on June 13th. It's a Tuesday evening, and that's going to take place in Tangent. We'll have a few of our former students who will be there for a casual chat. So you can get to check out the space. I'll be there as well. We'll have maybe a little bit more of a panel discussion as well, or probably just an open Q&A related to the course as well. And that's going to be in person at Tangent, Trinity Business School. Yeah, great to hear that, Andrea. So that's going to happen any day now. If you've signed up for this webinar, you're automatically on the mailing list, so you will get the update when the doors are open for that. I'll hang on for another minute or two if anyone has any questions. Otherwise, Sinead, Anya, everybody tuning in, thanks so much for your time today. And listen, get out there and enjoy that weather. Enjoy that sunshine. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Lillian. Take care.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Take care. Enjoy the rest of your day. Oh, brilliant, Andrea. See you on the 13th. Matthias, no problem at all. Excellent, Matthias. Yeah, look forward to hopefully seeing you on the course if you're going to apply. For everyone else, maybe I'll see you on the 13th, or drop me an email after this. It's brian@workwellireland.ie. Otherwise, you will get updates from Tangent, from the Tangent mailbox, from Joanne, from Julio, from Ashu. And yeah, we will be in touch about the course. So thanks so much for your time.